Welcome to the Awakening and Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes at awakeningpodcast.org and speakingpodcast.com. My guest today is a cyber crime expert with almost 40 years of experience in law enforcement and corrections. He's been recognized with the top awards for his work in promoting cybercrime awareness and control tools within the community corrections, including honors from the American Probation and Parole Association and the Federal Probation and Pretrial Officers Association. He's the author of 3 books. One is due in the fall, which is kind of now, and I mean, for my English and European listeners, we say autumn, but I know the Americans say fall, so that's, and you're from Cleveland, Ohio. Please welcome Art Bowker.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to discuss cybercrime and, of course, my new book coming out that I co-authored with Todd Shipley, a retired sergeant and computer crime expert from Reno, Nevada. So I really appreciate this opportunity.
No problem. And to be honest with you, I realize how important it is, based on a conversation as well recently of somebody telling me, somebody in their 30s, that when they were 10 or something like that, that they were on a chat and basically only kind of realized later that they were kind of, I suppose, digitally molested and didn't even realize it at the time. They were being groomed. And it's kind of rampant, and it's very important that people kind of are aware, because some people just let their kids off on the computer. So before we kind of delve deep into that, you might kind of tell us a little bit about your career and then how you got into all of this.
Okay. Well, I started off as a criminal investigator with the Department of Labor doing financial investigations, and that's where I developed accustomed to using computers for financial records. Then I became a U.S. probation officer, and because of my expertise in computers, which was above what the other officers were, I started being tasked with coming up with ways to monitor the computer offenders we were seeing. And about that time is when sex offenders were using computers to download, create child porn, and also to try and groom minors for sexual purposes. So I ended up developing tools to be able to search their computers, to monitor their computers, and come up with restrictions for that. And I got a lot of training through the High-Tech Crime Investigators Association, the FBI, National White Collar Crime. Anyway, I developed an expertise in that. Also, we were dealing with counterfeiters and check forgers and bag frauds, and everybody was using computers to commit these crimes. And developed a relationship with Todd Shipley, my co-author. And well, first I wrote my first book, which had to do with probation and parole officers supervising offenders, once they got sentenced by the federal courts, or any court. But he and I developed a relationship, and we wrote a second book together called Investigating Internet Crimes, which was focused on explaining to law enforcement how to collect information online so it can be used in court, and how to trace IP addresses, and how to do undercover cases online. And so we wanted a book after that helped the general public to understand what they need to do to protect themselves and their families online, and also to not only tell them that the things that everybody hears, update your passwords, have antivirus, have all your software up to date, change passwords from the administrator, just the normal techie things that we kind of equate as being tech things, but also how to survive if they are attacked, what to do to minimize it, what to do to notice behaviors in either their children or their elderly adults that they care for, that they might be victimized or being in the process of being victimized. So we came up with checklists and red flags to look for in this book. And we really wanted to make it something that you didn't have to have an IT degree or computer background. And I'm so glad that you're also reaching the UK audience, because we wrote this book. There's a lot of having to do with the US, but we provide information that's applicable to other countries as well, the UK, Canada. We've got links in there. We talk about the credit bureaus that are overseas. So it's a book that can be used by the general public in multiple, no matter wherever you live. You're going to pull some information out of there about what you can do and who you can contact in case things go bad. And we also, from kind of a law enforcement perspective, teaching the general public, okay, you've been victimized. What does the police need to do to go after the guys or girls that victimized you? And we talk about documenting, taking screenshots of images or text messages or whatever, and being prepared to provide that to law enforcement so that, they can go after the people. And I can tell you, as we were writing this book, we became aware of the victimization of the elderly. It's just rampant. And there was a study out of the UK where I think it was like, I want to say like 3/5 of the elderly have received scam calls or attempts to scam them through whatever media. And that's amazing. And too often these schemes, they end up with the elderly being victimized not only financially but emotionally. They feel that they can't trust people, and they literally go after their life savings. And it's kind of the term that is, as they describe it, is pig butchering. Basically, they fatten up the target with love and attention, and then they go after them financially, get them to invest in cryptocurrency or some fraud. And that's the butchering part, where they're just slaughtering their finances. So it's an evil that, as computers and the internet bring a lot of good to the world, but they bring a lot of bad to our doorsteps.
Yeah, I mean, it seems rampant, and like there's a few people now that are actually recording it, and they're showing like these centers. Some of them are in kind of like Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, and stuff like that, and they're actually recording them and they have fake voices, like pretending, and it's like the way that they do it and how aggressive they are. It's disgusting, and I can only imagine somebody who gets their life savings drained because there's the embarrassment and just like not knowing where the next meal comes from and everything, because they are emptying their account, and like you'd hear them online just threatening them. You need to get them, because there's different ones. Maybe you touch on the one you said, the crypto, but I've seen one where they're actually trying to get them to get the physical money, post the money somewhere. So it looks like they've got a few people involved in that.
There is literally a criminal organizations that are doing this. I'm sure there are individuals that are doing it, but the real problem is there are criminal organizations set up in some of these countries where it's basically an industry. And there's also a human trafficking element in this, because the people that are working in those criminal enterprises are tricked into coming into the country based on some job description. And the organization, they arrive, think they're going to be working in, some tech field. They take their passport and they basically enslave them to do these schemes, and they won't let them leave. And there's been reports that some of them are beaten, and probably worse. But that's how they get some of these workers in there. They trick them into coming to the country, and then they have different roles. There might be one role where they're out sending, the initial message to connect with somebody, and then that's handed off to somebody else who does the sales pitch and the grooming, and then how they get the money. And There was a case that was reported in the New York Times of an attorney. It was not a romance scheme. It was, your account has been taken over. Your account is being used to buy child pornography. And if you don't cooperate with us, we don't think you were involved in the child pornography, but you need to turn over that bank account to us for safekeeping. This attorney did that. And then they go, we need your help to go after these people. And he would transfer money from his account to assist them. And he actually was convinced to go and buy gold, hard, real gold, and leave it at a drop spot for the perpetrators to get. And, we think, what kind of person falls to victim to these schemes? And these criminals use every psychological trigger they can think of to lower the person's defenses, to make them believe it's real, that they are who they say they are. And they're using artificial intelligence as well. The sales pitches are becoming more polished. The initial letters or emails, if they're using that technique, they don't have the grammar errors that we were used to seeing in the old spams. And in one case, it was a report that was done out of Latin America. They were downloading voices off of social media of, say, somebody's relative. They were taking that voice and feeding it in an artificial intelligence so they could mimic that voice when they called to make a ransom demand. And, I really feel for these victims out there. And, at first blush, you're thinking, well, what kind of idiot would believe that? And that's victim shaming, and that's not what we should be doing. And these are very sophisticated criminals. They know the triggers to push. They know what to do to convince this person. And they also, once they get them into that web, they will do things like, you don't want to talk to your family about this. We want to keep your family safe. Let's just, they isolate them, and they isolate them so that the person's not going to go talk to somebody that's going to go, wait a minute, this is BS. You need to stop. So they're very sophisticated individuals. They're using techniques that are very, there's certain triggers like, oh, you need to do this right away. That's a time factor to get the person to act right away. So I really feel for these victims. And, one of the things we talk about is if you're dealing with an elderly person and they have become a victim, you need to have empathy towards them. You need to go, it's not your fault. We're going to work through this. This is a sophisticated organizations, and we actually provide examples of other people who have fallen into these schemes. And, it's really something that both myself and my co-author feel passionate about.
With the AI, because I get asked a lot of times to do kind of beta testing and everything, the fact that I have so many shows and big audience, and like one of the guys was able to translate my podcast, so I was going to put it out in different languages, so I just done a kind of 5 minutes in Spanish but with my voice, and I sent it to a few people, and a Spanish person actually thought it was me. I said, I've been practicing my Spanish and I just want to know, would you actually, but I didn't do the video because I said you'd nearly cop it with the video. But that just shows the level. So I've even with my mother, because obviously my voice is out there all the time, I've got a code for her that if there's ever somebody that says, or it's me, you just ask this one question, and I've already told her, so she knows straight away that they would never know. And so it's like, just in case, because I've heard of it, and some people might think you'd never fall for that. It's like, it's impossible to know. They can just ring up as if, hey, I need money, or transfer me, or do that, whatever. They like, I've heard other people, but I know how good it can be done with the AI.
Yeah, that's a good point that you bring up about the password or passphrase. We talk about, you need to have, that's one way to prevent that, is to have a passphrase or password They can't be guessed by anybody that, from looking at your social media or whatever. And we also say, don't trust the number, call somebody. So many of these schemes I've heard of people like, oh, so-and-so's on the phone, and, somebody else comes in and go, well, no, they're not. They're at home. Here, call them with this number. So just that, that step of calling them at a number, or calling somebody who knows, separate from that scheme, that initial call, it's, but again, they're pushing that time thing. You need to do this right away, or this bad thing is going to happen. And that's a time. That's what salespeople do when they're trying to sell something. You need to do this right away, or you'll lose this opportunity. And it works effectively. And, the things they're doing,
And just on that, actually, because it's kind of irrelevant, but no matter what I do now, if I'm talking to somebody for whatever business, I never allow them to do that to me. So recently I experienced where a guy was like all nicey pie trying to do this, and then said, listen, I'll give you this discount if you do this now. And when I said, I never make a decision on the moment, I always think about it, and I come back and you just see his attitude changing and going from Mr. Nice Guy to aggressive. So I encourage everybody, no matter what they're doing, never make a decision, because I was working with somebody and we parted ways, and I started studying how he was doing things, and I've even realised that the sneaky tricks that he was doing that I wouldn't in a million years do. I never even realised it till later. And it's like they do the same thing. And like if we look at how they catch a lot of people, I've seen them where they pretend they're Microsoft or they're this, so they get access. So I suppose we might educate people how they're grabbing them, because a lot of the time they're going into your computer and they're just saying, hey, we'll help you with this virus or whatever. So you might touch on that.
That's a good point about the tech fraud schemes. One of the ways they'll get into somebody's computer is they'll either send an email, it could be a telephone call, and they'll say, I'm from Microsoft, I'm from Norton's, they'll tie it in with a business, a legitimate business, and they'll say, you have a virus. Our systems noted that you have a virus. You need to let us have access to your computer. And they'll either, if it's an email, the email is going to have the logos of the company that they're purporting to be from, and they'll say, click on this link. And once you click on that link, if you didn't have a virus before, you more than likely have one then. And they will walk you through whatever process, and they'll get access to your files, your passwords, and they will steal you, and it's steal from you. That's the tech fraud scheme. They basically, we're from Microsoft. We noticed something going on, and I know when my father, before he passed, he was getting those calls, and they would try. He would hand the call to me, and I would go. They would say, well, you need to log on to this thing. And I would go, oh, really? Because I knew what they were trying to do. I'd play around with them, but it's obvious they're trying to get you to believe their story and then act, I'm an authority. I know, you can trust me. I'm a company that you do business with. Trust that I am who I am, who I say I am, and that I'm doing something for you, and they believe that. And I don't know if you've seen the movie Beekeepers. The Beekeepers movie's out in the U.S. It's been out for a while, and that's basically the premise, or part of the premise is that there's a criminal organization using these tech fraud schemes to rip people off, and the hero of the movie has because they're targeting the elderly. He's basically comes up with a line. I'll probably misquote it, but basically, when somebody victimizes a child, they have their parents that they can turn to and others. But when somebody victimizes the elderly, they're left alone to deal with the aftermath, with the the swarm of the hornets, which is the criminals. So yeah, the tech things, and there's kind of a variation of that. I don't know if I'm sure you get it in the UK or in Europe. There's a warrant out for your arrest, and you need to send money to pay off that warrant. And we get that in the U.S. My dad used to get the calls from the FBI. I go, Dad, the FBI never calls you and sends you an email that you got a warrant. They just come out and get you. Because, I worked in the federal system with, U.S. Marshals and the FBI. Because they never call somebody up and go, hey, we're coming to get you. I go, that's a scam. And I'd get those calls. I'd get those calls on my work phone. But we live in a time where, when my father was alive, he grew up in a time where you trust the government. You trust that they will, at least in the U.S., that, well, nobody would try to imitate the government because that's a bad thing to pretend you're the government. And he could not accept the fact that people were doing this. And he goes, well, why don't they go out and get them? And I go, Dad, they're not in this country. They're in another country doing this. So, but, that generation grew up, you trust the government. People were not going to go out and rip you off like this. And unfortunately, these criminals are thriving on that environment.
There's a load of people offering services as well that pretend they've got stuff. And loads of people I've helped with because they'd kind of bounced ideas off me. And I'd say, I do a search and I go, this guy's got this. So I'm always checking. And I was looking to get lead generation for one of the businesses that I was working with. And I got the testimonials. They were all English-speaking testimonials from America and the UK. And I listened to them mentioning the company. Could see a man's LinkedIn with over 1,000 people in his group and all the posts and the same in the Facebook. Had a conversation one-to-one. He explained exactly how they do it. Said, grand, I used Remittle to do the transfer. I was like, there was no way in my heart, I thought, because I always check these things out. And next, it disappeared. And I contacted Remittle, which is like an alternative. I don't know, you're familiar with Remittle. It's like you've got Revolut, which I find very good, but Remittle is like another one. And when I was talking to him, and I said, look, you need to block this guy because he's obviously doing scamming. And the girl was like, oh, I block your account. And I said, why are you blocking me for? I said, it's not that he has access to my account. It's just that I have transferred money. And now I realize that is it possible to get it back and all this. And I even recorded it because I don't trust any financial institution, to be honest, from experience. And then I asked to speak to a supervisor. She said he's not available and he'll call me back. They never called me back. They blocked my account. And when I started reaching out to them, they basically said it's closed, keep away from us kind of thing. Got onto LinkedIn, reported the profile. Hey, this guy's a scammer. They done nothing about it. Got onto Facebook, reported a scammer, done nothing about it. It was a guy in Pakistan, so I had all his bank account details and everything because to do Remittle, it shows you all this stuff. Got onto the Pakistan Department of, and they basically sent it back and said, no, you need to get onto. So it was like, it didn't make sense like that. Nothing was done. And I like, how should somebody report? Like, how can you? I mean, I knew I wouldn't get my money back, but all I wanted to do was make sure he doesn't catch the next person. So how do you stop these scum of the earth as they go?
Well, we talk about in the U.S., the Central Clearinghouse for Internet Crimes is the Internet Crime Center, which is run by the FBI. We include links to other jurisdictions of how they would report that, and it would be, take the screenshots of what happened, the details. I mean, you have a boatload of information. I would have thought, I know in the U.S. they would act on that. It might not be. They might not go out and get the guy in handcuffs right away, but they would log that as a report. And as more reports would come in, they would go, this is a substantial problem. It's funny you mentioned about Facebook and LinkedIn. They didn't do anything. I have reported fake profiles to Facebook or Instagram, things that are clearly violating their rules. Like, for instance, selling sex online. I go, those are prohibited. And they would go, we didn't find anything wrong. And they have that in their user agreement that you're not supposed to do that, but they are not out there scouring and looking for that. And I mean, I know a site, I look at a site and I go, that's a fake site. I know that is not the real person. And because they're not a friend of mine, I can't report them, even though I know they don't give me the link of, well, who is the person that this person is supposedly be? They're not, they try. I think they could do more. We talk about in the book, facial recognition. The software is out there that can, identify this is who this person is based on this picture, that they could run those images and say, wait a minute, this account's already been opened. Wait a minute, this is not who this person is, and stop it there, but they just don't do it. And, we talk about that in the book, that just because Facebook says they don't let sex offenders on there doesn't mean there isn't sex offenders on. We also talk about the dating sites, that they make promises and they've been found to not keep up with those promises about, not letting sex offenders on there. It's basically, they wait till somebody reports it before they do something. And then it takes, depending on the volume in that, it takes them a while to take action. But from what you're describing, I know in the US, they would take those files and they would open a case, and you would get a case number. And you're right, you might not get your money back, but if they eventually catch this person, at least in the States, they'll know this person's a victim, received so many assets, and you might get a portion of those assets that are received, that if you're listed as a victim. So we stress that it's very important to report those. It may not seem like they're doing what you would like them to do, but that's the first step. And then also for insurance purposes, if you've reported it and you have insurance, the insurance company is, well, did you report it to law enforcement? Do you have a report number or something? And you can recover the losses that way.
Now, you mentioned like the sex ads and everything. I mean, I'm shocked on like Facebook, like hard porn showing in front. You're going, what's this? And you report, and nothing is done, and ads as well. And on Twitter as well, you have the same thing. But the scary thing is, like, you're giving all your information on that, but there's data breaches with all these people. Like, so, like, I get an email in from Google saying, oh, there's been a data breach. There's like 60 of your accounts have been compromised. And like all of the, like Microsoft, they've all been caught, even Facebook as well. They've all been data breached. Like, so what people assume to be the top tech companies in the world, I mean, I think they're all orchestrated because none of them are good. I mean, they've been proven for cheating for everything that they do. So is it orchestrated? Probably. But like, the thing is, you're giving, like, for example, I'll give you an example. One of the guys that I was talking to, he was using one PassSafe or something, where he puts all his passwords on one kind of cloud kind of thing. And I was like, not a million years would I do. And that was compromised. So all his passwords will give, and I mean, like, that is very dangerous. I mean, it's bad enough when it goes out because, when they advise you. But I mean, what, like, for example, if you've got like 60, 70 accounts and then they say, oh, your passwords have been compromised. If you take into account the amount of time it takes to go into each of them and change it, it's painful and it's a lot of work.
Yes, I agree. We talk about having a password manager. And I'm sure I do, like you say, on the cloud, because the cloud could be hacked. But it is very important to have different passwords. If you use the same password for every one of those accounts, you are going to have to go through all those accounts. But if you're using different passwords for each account, you're not going to get those, like all of your passwords, because the chance, well, they're not going to guess all or get all of them. And, you mentioned about those breaches. Both Todd and I, my co-author, have we've got those notices too. We worked for the federal government, or our files were on with the federal government because of our law enforcement backgrounds and having to have a background. those records were breached, and we were part of that big block that, our names and dates of birth and social security numbers was out there. So, one of the things that we talk about is more than likely you're going to be a cybercrime victim. If not now, in the future, and probably multiple times. And no matter how you secure your personal computer or your devices and how locked down they are, your data was going to be with somebody else, and it's going to get hacked. Or we talk about the Internet of Things. One of your devices is going to leak information out. So it's really, you got to be prepared for it and how you're going to deal with it. And these breaches that happen when, in fact, the person that's working with us with the publisher, he texts us an email. I just got notified that my social security number and date of birth are out there online. What do I do? And I walked him through, freeze your accounts, change your passwords. Those are the things you do right away. But when that data is released, the social security numbers and credit card numbers, those have a short shelf life for the criminal to use, because once it's determined that's happened, people put in freezes, the credit cards are canceled. So there's a short window that information has value to the criminal marketplace. But the other data, the address, your name, your email that might not change, those have value for the social engineering attacks, to send out an email. For instance, I don't know if this has been going on in the US or in Europe, but there's been reports of people getting these emails. I know what you've been doing on your computer, and I'm going to report it if you don't send me money. It's an extortion attempt. But the thing that's catching people is they'll have a picture of their house enclosed with the email. And this adds authenticity to the, I know who you are, here's your house. Well, how would they know where their house is? If there's been a data breach?
Google Maps even.
Right.
If they have
Google Maps. And they have their address tied to their email and their name from a data breach. So that's how those things metastasize into something. Maybe your accounts weren't breached. Maybe your bank account wasn't, or your ID wasn't stolen, but they're used to weaponize that other social data that doesn't change. And that's why we say, nobody's got spyware installed on your computer. They're not taking, that's a scam. And, that brings into an interesting thing or not interesting, but a terrible tragedy is sex extortion, where they are targeting minors, and they get them to send explicit pictures. And then once they get the pictures, they go, you need to send me whatever money you have by this date, by this time. And some of these extortion attempts will include a clock, like the clock is ticking, like you need to act. And tragically, some of these kids are killing themselves over the attempts. And the parents are like, what happened? What's going on? Why did that happen? And they find out, they get the digital, the cell phones or whatever, and they find out that the kid was being extorted. And these are, again, organizations, a lot of times are organizations in other countries that are running these scams. Well, they're one of the most horrendous things I can think of to go after a minor. And in the States, there's a clearinghouse for sexual exploitation reports. It's the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And they looked at the data, and in the last year of the data, they were averaging 814 reports of sex extortion, most of them financially motivated, 814 a week. And to me, that's outrageous.
And I mean,
So
when you have reported, you can probably put an extra 0 into that because most people wouldn't even report anything.
yeah, and then they reported, this some of these reports are coming from social media that have seen it happen, and they noted, I believe it was Instagram was the majority where the reports were coming from, that they saw this happening and they reported it, and they commented, they go, we believe this is underreported. It's that this is happening on other platforms. So you're right, it's more than likely underreported. And to think that used to be you just had to watch your kids in the neighborhood, and now in their bedroom they can be attacked by this nonsense.
And I mean, I mentioned it at the start, but basically, like, what's happening is people go into chat rooms, and these people go into like teen chat rooms or even children chat rooms, whatever, pretending they're the children, and then they end up grooming them. And sometimes it's bad enough if they're trying to extract money, but a lot of the times they're actually meeting them and they're sexually molesting them, and it's rampant. And like, is there apps or anything? Because I'm shocked at the amount of people, they don't even know what their kids' friends are or what they do. They just let them off on their own. And like, is there apps or anything to control this, that you can have trigger words or anything? How can we protect the kids?
Well, we devote a whole chapter to minors and their computer use, and we talk about, you need to, at an early age, you need to start with some kind of parameters for when they can use their computers and the controls. We talk about user agreements with them. Either, we have links to written agreements that you would enter into with your child, or, something you can discuss with them. One of the big things is, look, they don't need to go to bed with their cell phone. Their cell phone should not be going to bed with them. Cell phone needs to be charged in a public area, and it needs to be there so they can see it. A lot of these things are happening, via the cell phone. You can, say, look, we're going to check your computer. We're going to go on periodically and look at your cell phone. We're going to look at who you're texting, and actually look at the device. The same with the computer. We're going to look at your history. We do talk about installing monitoring software, and we just explain, in the U.S. there's some legal issues of, depending on where you're installing it, you might need to have two, if you're at a two-party state, both parties of a communication have to be aware that the computer's being monitored. In other states, it's just one person, but that opens up some legal issues. But monitoring software is an option. It's something we talk about, and the legal ramifications, and, maybe seek legal advice on that. And there's certain circumstances where you may want to do that in case your kid's being victimized as a cyberbullying or cyber harassment. We also talk about red flags. Maybe your kid's being victimized, and maybe they're withdrawing from the family. Maybe they're spending more time than is normal on the computer. Maybe they're spending less time. Maybe they're not doing the same activities that they used to. Maybe they're not eating. Maybe they're engaging in cutting behavior, cutting themselves, or talking about suicide. Those are all red flags that maybe there's something going on, at least on the, in the online environment, that is causing that. And you need to, investigate it, find out what's going on. But we talk about those red flags. But it really goes, instilling in your kids early on, what is appropriate, what they need to come to talk to you about. And, you've got to have that open communication. So you can bring in the tech aspects, the monitoring software, checking their computers and all that, but you really have to develop that rapport and that openness with them. And we also, talk about, what devices, what age group is appropriate. Like, you don't want to give a 5-year-old a cell phone. But, we have a suggested range of devices that they might consider for each age group. But we talk about fake news and stuff. Kids are exposed to that too, and we include a story of a young lady saw a post on social media that the next day was National Rape Day, and she believed that going to school she was going to be attacked and raped. So as a precaution, she took a knife to school, and they found the knife, and they're like, "Why did you, honor roll student, why did you bring a knife to school?" Well, it was announced it was National Rape Day, and I was afraid I was going to get raped. So, she got sanctioned for bringing the knife to school, but this BS story caused her to do something that got her into trouble. And, we have to teach kids about fake news online just as well as we have to be aware that whatever you see on the internet, this doesn't mean it's true. You've got to do some due diligence and investigate. And don't trust one source. Get multiple sources.
Because a lot of people are checking AI and they assume that the answer is right, or doing a Google search instead of using Brave. And I have caught AI lying so much that I stay away as much as possible from it because it is so dangerous, and it's basically created by the bad boys, unfortunately. And it's there's so many things that I have seen on it. If we look at the technology, the phones, because main ones, obviously you've got Apple and Android. Is there ones that can get hacked more? Because what I've seen is people, when they're using Wi-Fi, that's a way they get hacked. Or I've even seen, I think it was on the Patrick Bet David, there was a guy on, and it was the chargers that they have with the chargers, so someone could say, "Hey, you can use my charger," and that's tapping in. But if we look at the phones themselves and kind of touch on kind of getting into the phones, what advice could you give us?
Well, I know that Android is recently, there's been reports of Android getting hacked, or there's been security breaches on Android. But what I would say is you just have to keep up with the news on which device, because they're both going to have problems, and it's kind of like the market share. The bad guys know who's got the most devices, and they're going to develop tools to crack into one of those devices or to figure out how to overcome. It might be Apple this week and it might be Android the next. They're going to look at the market shares, and they're entrepreneurs, so to speak. They want to maximize their attacks and have more victims. So they're going to, whatever system they're working on ways of getting into it. And it kind of has something to do with, do you have the most current version of your operating system? Is your are you doing the updates that you kind of got forced to do those, but are you doing the updates? Do you have antivirus software on your cell phone? Those types of things. We also talk about the apps that are associated with those phones, and you really need to, if you're going to use an app, know what it connects to, whether you're comfortable with those settings. Only use apps that are within those stores, like Apple's, whatever the apps are in Apple, or the Android apps, whatever those are. Those have been vetted, and you have a less likely chance of getting malware. Don't use some app that you pulled off the internet that's not associated because it hasn't been vetted. So my advice is, check out what's going on with which device through reviews. And we talk about, it's so imperative to keep up with the breaches so that you're aware of what's going on. And if you're a internet service provider, or your bank or something has been attacked, you've got that information before they actually send out the notice. So it's important to keep up with those. We provide a couple links of websites that we thought were pretty good that provide those updates to the public before, it hits mainstream. But, that would be my advice. Check out the reviews, check out the news stories about which devices have been recently hacked, and act accordingly.
And like, I know that one of the ways is there's free software and you just download it. But part of that is they're actually putting spyware on your stuff. But like, if we look at like the antiviruses and everything, I mean, I don't trust them either, to be honest with you, because I've seen their aggressive marketing. They're just popping stuff up the whole time on your screen, which annoys the crap out of me. But I know people that were used like really heavy into the antivirus stuff, and they were getting more viruses than anybody I know. And like, same thing. It's run by people that I wouldn't trust with so can we really trust any of the antivirus? Is there any that you'd say, okay, I think these are way better than that? Because for sure, there's a lot of them that are intentionally causing problems with your computer so you'll upgrade or you continue and everything. It's like, I know that for a fact.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. The big market shares are Norton and McAfee. Those are two that, come out as the top ones. I'd be very leery of the new ones that are coming out. There's one that some people in the US say you shouldn't use that one because of their ties to a certain country. It just has to do with you're doing your due diligence. And I know, like, does the software, is it been around for a while? Are they reporting breaches? How active are they? What are the ratings? And we talk about that. One of the things I think if you're looking to make a decision on antivirus software, I would look at, does it do regular updates on the definitions? What does it say it does? Does it block the attacks? And one thing you also need to kind of factor in is, does it have a holistic approach to detecting a virus? For instance, there's such a thing as a 0-day virus, which is a virus that they don't have the definitions out yet for. So, this virus is released, and there's certain behaviors that it goes after. Does your antivirus look for those behaviors as opposed to just looking at the definitions? So those are the kind of things that I would look at in your antivirus, which one to pick. And you get accustomed to one over the other, and that's kind of a choice. But the antivirus, anti-spyware softwares, those are definitely, you need to have them, but you also have to have the discipline. Don't open files you don't know where they came from. Don't click on links. If you check out a website before you go to it. We provide links of where you can take a URL and go to a website and check and see if that's a malicious website. And if you go to a website that all of a sudden you're seeing all kinds of pop-ups and click-ons, and well, that's a red flag. You need to not click on those pop-ups, but close your browser and get out of there. Because
are they actually catching the people creating all these stuff? Because it's like it just gets worse and worse. So is there, like, the FBI or whoever all around internationally, are they actually doing anything? And if they do catch them, what do they do to them?
Well, there's been reports where these guys that have released the ransomware, some of those big players are getting hit. They're getting indicted, convicted, and they're getting 7-year terms, I think, is one of the ones I saw. So they are going after those guys, but it gets to, they have to reach to a certain level of notoriety or dollar loss where they go after them, that they can build the case. If you hit major targets long enough, you're going to get the attention of those authorities and you're going to get prosecuted. But again, it's a criminal enterprise, and these viruses, and these attacks, there are guys that are creating them, and then there's a culture too where there's a code that you can punch in and say, okay, I want this kind of virus or for this attack, and you can download tools to make your own viruses. So it's going to be continuing battle. And then with AI is being used to develop these tools as well. So I might not have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, or not criminal justice, but computer science. But if I know where to look online, I can download the tools to become at least a lower level hacker or somebody that's not protected against these defenses.
And these criminals, that are kind of all over the world, whether they're doing the small time stuff or targeting the elderly and stuff like that, when they're using VPNs, is that traceable, that you can trace back to exactly where they're based?
Yeah, there are criminals like the general public will have habits that their activities can be, they might, for instance, I reminded of the story about Tor. Tor is one of those anonymous, what you do is you log in and your internet traffic gets bounced all over the place and it can't be traced back to you. There was a gentleman that was involved in the illegal marketplace called Silk Road, where you could buy and sell drugs online. And that Silk Road was operated entirely on the dark web, and which meant you didn't know where it was located at. But this individual had used a acronym for his username, and he used that acronym on some place that wasn't encrypted. So they were able to tie the two identities together and were able to identify them. If you're on a VPN and you go and buy something off the VPN outside of that, you're sometimes bleeding data and it can be traced back. So there are ways that law enforcement can get and there have been cases where they've been prosecuted. I know years ago there was a child pornography ring that was operating through one of the dark webs, and they were able to identify the server that it was on. They went and seized the server, and they got a warrant, and that warrant allowed the authorities to embed a code in the browser that would, whoever accessed that illegal website, they kept it up for a short period of time. Whoever accessed it, that code would be sent to that person's browser, and then it would phone home to a law enforcement. So they were able to identify these people based on that code. So there are ways law enforcement can track these guys, but it's time consuming, and they just can't go, well, I think it's this person, and go out and get them. They got to have evidence. And, again, reporting the things that we see, the crimes, those are a piece that help them in that puzzle to solve it.
With my crypto podcasting, there's a lot of people that have come on the show, and even a friend of mine, he lost $500,000, somebody just taking the money. But with, say, the NFTs, I think somebody started giving me gifts of stuff, and I'm like, I don't even know who sent it and everything, but I never done it. And I was like, it was like a cartoon semi-porn kind of thing, and I was like, what the fuck is this? I don't want this. And I never clicked on it or anything, but apparently if I clicked on that in itself gives my key access, and most people wouldn't even know that. And also, like, that most of the people, how they've been caught, and like some of the people, they're doing transactions all the time. They just change one little word in the domain name, and you wouldn't even copy it, and you fall for it because it looks the exact same and everything. But just for like the blockchain technology, let's say, or crypto, what kind of advice could you give to people to protect themselves?
Well, it goes back to the general things. Have a secure password. Don't reuse your password. And like you say, you received a link to something, and if you don't click on things, don't click on links sent to people from people you don't know. And even if you do know them, they could be infected and sending you a link. So, don't click on links willy-nilly. And, those are the big things. And also know who you're dealing with. Due diligence. Is this somebody you can trust isn't going to rip you off? Have you checked into their background? Do you know who they are? We have a whole section on, and then this is off a little bit, but on Marketplace, buying things online. You need to know who you're transacting business with before you engage in, sending them money and or sending them goods. So due diligence, know who you're dealing with. Don't click on links, strong passwords, and keep your system up to date as well.
Just finally, because this is something that I ask on the crypto ones for like estate planning, because you don't know what can happen in the morning. We could get hit by a bus, something could happen. And when people have their wallets and, sometimes they're not giving it to their spouse or whoever because the fear of actually it being robbed. And like, I've seen solicitors in Ireland selling a house a few times. So like even attorneys can be, and accountants can be criminals as well, unfortunately. So, like, to protect your stuff and ensure that it goes to your loved ones, have you any kind of advice on what way to do that in a safe way?
Well, we talk about in the elder chapter, the chapter protecting the elderly, we talk about those end-of-life decisions, like who is going to take over your digital assets, and, you need to establish that at some point. Who's going to get the passwords, who's going to have control over that. And you really need to establish that before your elderly parent doesn't know what the passwords are. And that person needs to understand what your wishes are for disposing that. Or who should get it. And you mentioned cryptocurrency wallets. Those would be one of the high price, this is the password, this is where it's located, and designate somebody. Unfortunately, you do have to trust someone, at least if you're trusting an attorney or in the States, if they do a victimization, you can recover those losses. But you need to trust, have somebody that you trust with those digital assets and have a plan in place for, if I pass, this is what I want to have to my social media account. This is where I want my cryptocurrency to go to, and really lay that out before you get hit by a bus, I guess.
Yeah, excellent. Listen, thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Art, you might let people know where they can find you.
We have a website that lists all of our contacts. It's the cybersafetyguys.blog. You can find out about myself and my co-author. We post up about news that we've seen, and there's a link to our books. Our book is now on Amazon for advanced sales. If you go by an author search by my name, Art Bowker, ARTBOWKER. I have a profile. You can follow me, and it'll update you about when that book is available. But the cybersafetyguys.blog is a quick way to find out about myself and my co-author, and also to get links to the book, as well as our other books.
Okay, perfect. I'll make sure I'll put the links, both the audio and the video. Thank you very much, Art.
Thank you. And again, thank you for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to discuss cybercrime in the book.
Very much. That's all for the Awakening Podcast and the Speaking Podcast. You'll find all our episodes on awakeningpodcast.org, speakingpodcast.com, sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, and share with your friends. And let us know, have you been a victim of cybercrime? We always love to read your comments. Until next week, take care. So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. As mentioned at the start, you'll find my 6 podcasts on bio.link/podcaster. And also, if you'd like to start a podcast or do a podcasting tour, you'll find the information on that or on the QR code that's there. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, and share with your friends because it really helps. Until next week, take care.